Assalamu alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, if you remember, we have been talking about Unit 4 for like quite some time now. But in the previous lecture, we have finished studying the text of the lesson, The Man Who Planted Trees. Before we begin the exercise, today we are going to discuss the exercise of this short story. Before we do that, I want you to quickly reflect back on the theme of the unit, which is hope, courage and determination. This is Unit 4. This is the theme of the unit. I told you this theme, these phenomena, these concepts are being explored through different stories and points. In the first part of this unit, if you remember, we have discussed determination. It was a story about an engineer and his determination to the cause. In the second lesson, which is 4.2 here, The Man Who Planted Trees, written by Giono, he's basically French. I told you this story was originally written in French and then later on it was translated into English. We have discussed its whole exercise, the text of the story. Before we discuss its exercise, I will quickly give you the short summary of the lesson. Basically, this lesson is about a man called Elisée Beaufort. He was also French, of course. And the writer, he said he visited this place. Where is the place? The place is basically, it is in the range of Alps mountain, which is there in Europe. He visited that place, which was a land which was barren, and there was no vegetation in that area. It was like close to desert, and he mentioned that this area is not too much familiar among the the travelers, etc. So people are not coming to this area very often. He visited that area just in order to explore the area, but unfortunately he said, I ran out of water the day before he was close to his first camping. And when he camped there, the situation was not very friendly. The place was quite wide open, and just because of that reason, the wind used to blow with a lot of speed in that area. So he could not risk to stay in that area, and he moved his camp from there, and he was moving forward in search of water. There he met a shepherd, and he was living alone in this area. He offered him water since the writer was out of water. He was thirsty, and he also offered him shelter. So he spent the night with that shepherd, and then he commented different things which we are going to discuss in the exercise in detail. He spent the night there, and then the next day also he spent 2 nights with him initially. It was in 1913, right? Then he went back to his own place, and then in 1914 the war broke out, First World War, and after like 5 years, at the end of the First World War, the writer, who was also a soldier, an infantryman, he was fighting in the First World War. He said, when I returned to this area, I could not believe my own eyes, and it was extremely a very different, unique experience, and the views and the whole landscape was changed. And that was changed because I skipped this part, which is a bit important. When he was staying back with the shepherd used to plant trees every day, and he was planting oak trees. Remember, I showed you oak trees pictures in the first lecture of this lesson. So he was planting those trees, and after 5 years, when he visited that area, this area was almost half full with the oak trees. And then later on, he explored the same place a few more times. Like the writer visited this place 3 times. And he said, for the last time when I went there, I saw that it was a spectacular achievement by human or by man, which was worthy of God. This work, this change was extremely unbelievable. It was a chain reaction, and everything was transformed. So when he made his final visit, to this area. This area was extremely beautiful. It was full of gardens, vegetables, greenery, hay fields, meadows, and water was flowing in that area. There was stream, brooks, and this was a complete transformation from a desolate, barren land into one of the most fertile lands and one of the best example of chain reaction. That is the whole story. And then, of course, Elziad Beaufair, who was the shepherd, he died in 1947. This is the whole story. Now we are going to talk about the exercise of this story, the man who planted trees. Remember that in this book, these exercises are basically divided into three sections. The first one is what we call recalling section, right? What recalling basically means that you will be asked direct questions about the story. For example, how old was the shepherd, or when did World War First broke out, or they can ask you, for example, that I will quote from the book later. Then we have the next section. In this section we have 17 questions. From question 1 to 17, they are being covered in recalling section. Then we have interpreting. In interpreting we have from 18 to 21, right? This is basically when you try to interpret the text. I'm not asking, or the writer will not ask you direct questions. Direct question in a sense that these information will not be available directly in the story. That you can say from line 7 to line 20, for example, this is the answer of this question. No, it won't be like that, right? It will be that you have to answer them from your own. Understand the story, get the concept, get the idea clear, and then answer those questions from your own. And then extending is one step further. I believe these two steps, these two parts in the exercise are extremely important. And then we have extending section, in which we have question 22, 23 and 24. Like there are three questions in this section, which is altogether different from all these questions. Till question 21, these last three questions, they are extremely, you will feel there will be a connection among them, among these questions, and they will have a connection to the story, but they have nothing to do with the story itself, right? Inshallah, I will, along with the exercise, I will discuss these things. Now, let's talk about recalling section 1. In recalling, we have the first question, question number 1. What does Jean Giono say about his long trip on foot over mountain heights? This is a question which addresses the very first lines of the story, where the writer says that this area that I am visiting, this is basically is one of the areas in Alps mountain range, and this area is not that much familiar to the tourists, right? This is your answer. But remember, if you remember in the previous lesson, we also talked about context. Please give context. I have repeated this thing time and again, and it is extremely important for you to give the context in the paper when you are writing, when you are answering these questions. You will answer this question in a way that this question has been taken from the story The Man Who Planted Trees, written by Jean Giono. If you want to say this thing otherwise, there is another way to say this thing, that this question is extracted from the story where a shepherd is planting trees in a desolate land without even owning the land and even knowing that this land belonged to whom, right? Without such intention, he is planting trees in that area. But before that visit, before this complete transformation, the writer visited this place and he said, this is a very barren, desolate land. Nobody lives here. The houses are in ruins. There are no proper houses. No people are living here. And this is like, a very far away area from the population, from the people. It is an isolated place, right? That was a description from the writer. Look at question number 2. I hope you get the idea in question first. Look at question 2. Where did Jean Giono find himself after 3 days walking? Now, as I mentioned, this is a huge area and he was walking in this area for almost 3 days. He found himself in complete desolation. this area which was completely desolate, and it was at its widest place. He was back after, sorry, he was after 3 days, he was at the widest place of this area, and he was out of water. Why did he mention that he was at the widest place of this area? Because when the area is wide open, there is a huge chance of wind, and he mentioned that the wind is blowing with a lot of speed in that area, right? Which will lead us toward the next question, which is question number 3. What does Giono say about the shepherd's living conditions? Now, you will answer the question in this way, that after the writer Jean Giono met the shepherd Elziet Beaufair, he offered him water, the shepherd offered him water, and he offered him shelter. When the writer entered his house, it was very neat, clean, organized, the dishes were washed, the rifle was oiled, everything was organized and placed on its required places. Also, the physical description of the the physical description of the shepherd also reveals that he was a very well organized person, because he was good in his dressing, his shave was properly shaved off, and his clothes, although there were the clothes were old, but they were clean, and it was mended in a very sophisticated way. That would be the answer for question number 3. Look at question number 4. Why does Giono decide to stay for the night at the shepherd's house? Now, if you remember, the first night that he spent was something that he was compelled to, he was forced to spend that night, and he mentioned that thing. But why did he spend the next night? He spent another night because, as he mentioned, that he got curious. He wanted to know more about this person. Why is he living alone here in this desolation, in this desolate land, alone, living from, extremely detached from the population or city life or urban life? Why is he living here? So he wanted to know more about the shepherd. That is why he said that, can I stay for another night? And the shepherd agreed. Question number 5. What did the shepherd do with the heap of acorns? It's a very simple question. You will answer the question that the shepherd, he used to collect acorns seeds, and he used to select the best of those acorn seeds, and he used to settle them or take them in a sack, the best 100 oak trees seeds, which we called acorns, and he used to plant them on daily basis, having a rod in his hand, and he used to stick it in the ground to make a hole for the oak seed. Question number 6. What did the shepherd carry instead of a stick, and what did he do with it? Okay. Now the question is, what was that other thing in his hand? It was basically an iron rod. So you will say, instead of carrying a stick, as most of the shepherds used to carry a stick, but he used to carry an iron rod. And why did he do that? Why he was carrying that iron rod? Because he needed to make a hole in the ground for acorns, for that oak tree's seed. So that is why he used to carry an iron rod with that, and he used to dig the ground with it and then plant a tree there. Question number 7. For how long did the shepherd plant acorn trees, and how many had grown into full grown trees? The shepherd was planting the trees from or since 1910. Since 1910, he was planting oak trees. When the writer visited him, in his first visit, when the writer visited him in his first visit, it was 1913. So it has been almost 3 years that he was planting oak trees, and almost 10,000 trees were almost present in that area. Question number 8. What did Giono discover about the shepherd's past life? Now, initially we did not know much about the shepherd, but then later on, the writer mentioned that the shepherd, he had a very good life back when he was young. He had a wife and a son, but then a tragic accident happened, and his son died, and also his wife. So he was all alone. he has nothing else to do, although he was working previously down there in the urban area. But then he decided that since I have lost my family and I have nothing else to do, why not, go in this area? And when he visited this area, he felt that this land is dying for trees. That is why he settled there and started planting trees there. Question number 9. What was the shepherd studying and for what purpose? Besides planting oak trees, the shepherd was also studying different other species of trees which are suitable for this area. So he was studying them, he was looking for moisture, which is a best place to plant birch trees. So he was studying all these different species of trees so that these other trees could also be planted in this area. Question number 10. What did Giono discover on his second visit to the area after the World War? Now remember, he made his first visit in 1913 and he made his second visit in 1915, right? So, the writer mentioned that when he visited for the first time to this area, what was the description. But after his second visit, he said that when I was standing at the very start point of that area, when I was standing on that area and I looked around, I thought, and it is as if these mountains are covered with a grey mist. And it was not a grey mist, and as if they are covered with a carpet. It was not a carpet, of course. It was those oak trees that has grown into full-fledged trees, and they covered the whole area. That is why it was evident to the writer as if these mountains are covered with a carpet. Question number 11. What was the shepherd doing when Giono met him the second time? Yes, this is also a bit important. Question number 12. You will answer the question in this way, that the first time when the writer visited the area, Elzette Bouffier, he was a shepherd. He was having almost 30 to 35 sheep, and he was planting trees at the same time. But at his second visit, the writer said that he switched jobs. Now he is no more a shepherd. He is only having 4 sheep, right? And he is now having beehives, right? So he has switched the job even to reach his goal, to plant more trees and to transform the whole area. That was his dream. That was his vision. So to achieve that, he even gave up being a shepherd, and he started harvesting or keeping beehives, right? So he switched basically the jobs. Question number 12. What is extent of the oak tree forest measured by Giono? If you remember, it is clearly mentioned in the book, in the story. The writer said that when I visited for the second time, the area that I could count and that I could believe it to be true, that it was almost 11 kilometers in its length and almost 3 kilometers wide. Just imagine, it's a huge area. It's a very huge area. 11 kilometers in length and 3 kilometers in width. That was basically the comments that were made by the writer in the story. Question number 13. What else the man been planting in addition to oak trees, and what did Giono find there? Remember, initially he was planting oak trees only, but he was also thinking to plant birch trees, right? And he chose different places for it. So on his second visit, when the writer reached there, he could not believe it, because he was successful in growing birch trees in this area, and he saw seedlings, right? Remember, I show you the picture of seedlings in the previous lecture. So he also grew those seedlings, and they were later on became full-fledged birch trees, right? Question number 14. What does Giono mean by chain reaction? What chain reaction does Giono describe, which he attributes to that man working alone? Now, I mentioned and I explained this phenomena early on, that if you disturb one thing in nature, it will have its effect on so many other things, on so many other phenomena, on so many other lives, not only human life but the animal life, and the sea life, and on every other life that we have on the earth. By chain reaction, the writer means that he was only planting trees. Then how did this whole huge revolution took place? We will call it a revolution, since it was a complete transformation from one thing into another. So by chain reaction, he meant that the shepherd, he was growing, or he was planting just oak trees, but as a reaction of that, the whole area was transformed from a desolate land into a meadow, into a very absolutely spectacular place to live. There were brooks then, the water was flowing in that area, vegetable grew in that area, flowers, there was greenery everywhere. And this chain reaction basically begins with the planting of trees. Question number 15. When did Giono see the man for the last time? Now, if you remember, the writer mentioned that I saw him in the June of 1945. Right? That was the last time the writer saw the shepherd. Question number 16. What did he discover about the area on his last visit 1945 after 35 years of his first visit 1910? And there's a mistake in that. This question, he visited the place in 1913, not in 1910, right? The writer. Anyways, the question is, what was the difference? Of course, there was a huge difference. I mentioned it earlier that the whole area was transformed, right? There were no brooks, there were no streams, there was no water previously, but now there is a lot of water flowing through the area. There are streams even. Forget about the water beneath the earth or under the earth. We were having water now, or the writer saw water flowing as, in the shape of streams and brooks, right? So it was a complete transformation. Again, there were no meadows previously, we have meadows now. There was no greenery, there is a lot of greenery now. Previously, the wind was also harsh and it blew with a lot of speed. Now, the wind is soothing, and even when it crosses the jungle or the forest, it produces a certain musicality, and there are different scents coming out of the air. It smells good, right? And of course, the population grew up. There were more people living in that area. Almost, 10,000 people were living in that area now. Previously, almost 25 to 26 people were living in that area. So it's a huge transformation in 35 years. And the last question in recalling section: how old was Bouffier when he died in 1947? So if you remember, he said in the June of 1945, when I saw Elizabeth Bouffier, he was 87. So in 1947, it means he was 89. So Elizabeth Bouffier was 89 years old when he died in 1947. Now, this was about the recalling section. From question number 1 to 17, I discussed them one by one, and I hope you understood them. Now we are going to proceed towards interpreting and extending. But to do that, I want you to check these other two parts in the next video. So I'm going to stop here. I will see you in the next video, inshallah. Thank you very much.